Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo South Dakota, and this is the Hog House Chronicles podcast. And I've had a chance to drive west and speak with a few folks. And last week, I just realized that a guy that I was in the Air Force with at Offutt Air Force Base, he's a SERE instructor, and he'll explain all that, plus his career, his training, all that kind of stuff. So I was pretty excited last week. I contacted him through Facebook, and he thankfully agreed to go ahead and be interviewed and be on the podcast. So, like I said, I worked for him for 6 months, but I never really got a backstory. We were always so busy, and I'm just really anxious to get the before story, during, and after from Bob Lathrop, SERE instructor.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Welcome to the Northwest, and congratulations on your career.
Oh, thank you.
I've always thought of you because of the Midwest connection.
Mm-hmm.
I was from Omaha. You were from up there around Sioux City.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Good to see you again.
Yep. And I didn't mention where we're at right now.
Yeah, we are in Spokane, Washington, about 15 miles from Fairchild, which is the home base of the Air Force SERE School. It's the premier and eminent school for the Air Force to work within the code of conduct and the ability to get people to return with honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I wasn't too surprised to see that you still lived in this area, basically just with that connection. And I only got here like a couple hours ago, and we set this up. So we talked a little bit while I was setting up.
Yeah.
Got just a couple tidbits of information, but I want to save most of it for here.
You're pretty close-mouthed about it all.
But yeah, I'm just very excited to be here. It was a nice surprise because usually I'll pick a spot out to go visit friends and then see who's all along that path, and this really worked out well. So I'll be heading to Great Falls, Montana tomorrow, and we'll see if we do another one of these or not. But
well, cool.
But I would like to get into your story as much as you want to tell.
Okay.
This is the way we always start these. Where you were raised, whatever you want to tell about your family, family you've made. I'm very interested in how people got interested in the military and then how they took that next step to take that leap, and what were the circumstances for choosing SERE? Did you have a lot of choice? Or what have you, because there's a lot of different ways out there a person can get in their career field. So the floor is yours.
Okay, well, direct me as you will. I'll try and carry this on forward. I am originally from Omaha, Nebraska, and I lived there the first 22 years of my life. And I'm from North Omaha, and I'm one of 9 children.
Wow.
My father is a veteran. He served in World War II as a submariner. And that was not really a focus of our family life. He got out of the military, went to Creighton University, and went on with his career. Of my other siblings, I got 4 brothers and 4 sisters. 4 of the 4 brothers, my oldest joined the Navy back at the tail end of Vietnam. And then I had a brother who, after I had joined the Air Force, had joined the Marine Corps and served out his initial term and then got out and moved back to Omaha. So all the guys are back in Omaha except me, and the rest of the girls are spread out throughout the country. I got 3 in Oregon and 1 in Toronto, in various careers. At about 22 years, I'd done a variety of careers, mostly construction work. And decided something else had to happen. And the military was hiring, I was told, so I went down and talked to the recruiter and talked to various people in our extended family about options within the Air Force. That seemed like the way to go. So I went down and talked to the recruiters. They gave me the pamphlets on everything. Still not sure which career field I was going to go into. I talked to one of our family friends who was a loadmaster, and he convinced me that that was the route to go. And later on, I was talking with my uncle, who was a retired '06, and he asked me about it. I said, well, I'm looking at going into recruiting, but I won't be able to get into that for another, 7, 8, 9 months. And he goes, no, just go in. I said, well, Uncle Dean, I can't. They won't let me in because the career field isn't open yet for me to get into it. And he goes, well, you just go in open general, which is generally the kiss of death.
General.
Yeah, open general, and then tell them you want to go into loadmaster, and they'll pick you up. And I said, but it's closed right now. And he goes, Bob, I used to run the school. There's a seat for you. I said, okay, so I did. And I took off in 6 weeks from my initial conversation to departure. And about halfway through basic training, some guys, they said there's a special presentation about another career field opening up, looking for volunteers. It was a volunteer only. You didn't hear about it at the recruiters. It was just these guys. And I said, well, okay, let's go see what this is about. And it was Staff Sergeant Dave Langley, Chris Christofferson, and Master Sergeant Cumberfeld, I believe it was, or Jensen. Later became chiefs. And they told me about survival. And I thought, this sounds pretty cool. They said, if this is something you might be interested in, we have a more in-depth thing coming up here in 3 days or whatever it was. You can come back. And so I came back, and they laid out exactly what survival was and where it was located, and the fact that we have the opportunity to train other people under adverse conditions to come back intact with their honor and integrity. And I said, that sounds pretty cool, to be able to give somebody a little bit of knowledge to get back to their families. So we said, yep, this sounds like it for me. And so they had us do a couple of drills. One was run up and down 3 flights of stairs with a 60-pound ruck 20 times or something. And they said, well, what do you think? And I said, what else is there? I mean,
Step one.
Yeah, step one. Okay, this is not much to do right here. What else do I got to do? And they said, well, you got to take the psych eval. And hey, I passed that. And then they said there's one more meeting, and that was when I met one of the master sergeants. He said, all you got to do is 10 push-ups. And I said, and that had to be Martin, Master Sergeant Cal Martin. And I said, okay, we used to do push-ups all the time anyway.
Right.
Yeah, in school, sports. And I said, okay. So he said, okay, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to start with you in the up position. And then I'll say down. And then I'll say up, and down. And then when you say up, you say 1. And I said, 4 count. Okay, we can do that. That was what we did in wrestling. Okay. So we got into the position exercise. He says, down. On your first day of survival training, you will be issued some equipment. First thing you will be issued is a jackknife. And he went through all the issue, and he goes, up. And I went, oh, my God.
4 count plus story.
Plus story. He forgot to add plus story. And I made it to maybe 7. And I was whooped. And I looked at him. They said, what do you think? And I said, well, I didn't do your push-ups. And they said, we don't care. Do you still want to do this? And I said, well, yeah, but I didn't do your push-ups. And they said, if you still want to do this after that, you're the kind of guy we're looking for. So we did that. And I said, yeah, great. That's exactly, I still want to do this. And they said, okay, we got one more meeting after this. And that was to do a 5-minute impromptu lecture. And they gave me, I think it was a key. And I had to talk about a hotel room key for 5 minutes. And with the introduction, the overview, the meat, and the transitions, the closure, and remotivation, all that stuff. And I thought it went horrible. And they said, well, if you still want to do it, we'll take you.
Because you listed all the categories, but you hadn't been trained in those categories yet.
Right.
So
Yeah. So how do you put all that stuff together? You just try as best you can. Mm-hmm. And if you don't try, you don't want. So from there, we adjourned, and they gave me tickets to Fairchild. And that's when I showed up here for 6 months of training, from where they started with an introduction into the environments and the basic survival needs. And these are the things you're going to be doing. You're going to be looking for your shelter, your signal, your food, water, fire, taking care of yourself medically and psychologically in this basic environment, which was the temperate environment where we are here in the Northwest. And that was in July of 1981. So we go through that training, and then they took all that, put us out in the field, had us apply it, and then they nurtured us along in how to fine-tune that application for that environment. And then we'd step into a different environment, whether it's the desert or the Arctic or the open water or the coastal environment or the river, or even in evasion, and talked about how to adapt those basic techniques for those new environments that we're facing and what makes those environments.
And you hit the first two letters in the acronym. So tell them what the acronym is. In
Survival and evasion, resistance and escape is the SERE
SERE
acronym.
Not Siri.
Not SERE, not SERE. Yeah, but it's, and we weren't then known as SERE. We were known as strictly survival instructors.
I see.
Because that's just where we were at that time. It isn't that we didn't do that stuff, but the emphasis was getting people out of the field or back into friendly control as quickly as possible and as in best condition as possible. So we had the school out at Fairchild. Well, we went through that for 6 months, and at the end, we went from 18 down to 21 people. Or pardon me, from 32 down to 21 people left in the class at the end of that training. And then they dispersed us out into the field training flights, which there was 4 at the time. And we were assigned to different squads with a trainer. And then the trainer took all this rough knowledge that we had and turned it into a little more refined ability to present it to the students that we were going to be working with. And we first started out watching our trainer go through and teach 100% of the course. Then you start knocking off percentages and specific lessons, both on base and off base. And eventually you go ahead and you teach 100%. They say, okay, you're good. Now let's do one with another evaluator coming in and watching you. Okay, you're right. This guy's good. He's ready to teach on his own. And so we did that. It was about a 6-month process to get that certification. Then you carry a crew by yourself. So you got a 2-3 striper out there with 11 crew members from the rank of 05 down to E1. And you're taking them through the temperate environment in the middle of the rain, in the middle of the sleet, in the middle of the snow, in light and dark, teaching them how to survive. And you think about where else in the Air Force do you find an E4 running crews like that?
Right.
That's a lot of assets, and that's a lot of, they've already been through pilot training, and they've already been through their crew position training by the time they get to us. So there's a lot of investment in that crew that this young person is carrying. It's not always the E4 because we had some cross trainees come into the career field as well. Mm-hmm. So, but that still speaks to the trust that they have built up in these people to go out into the wilderness and do the training.
So that was the birth of that career field then, was right there in the early 80s.
Not the career field itself. Just
okay.
Yeah, that started way back after World War II in the basement of a gun club, according to Chief Moran. that in Germany, they said, we're losing too many people because they don't have the ability to do this outdoor living thing.
Right. I figured it had to go back a ways, but
It did.
I sadly had not researched it.
Yeah. So initially it was, let's get them trained in this Arctic stuff. Arctic, and then the first big school was out at Colorado, then Nevada at Reno, and then up here to Fairchild in the 60s. And there was, for a time, a marriage between the rescue community and the survival community. And that was early in the development of the career fields. Mm-hmm. But to get into the rest of this story, I spent a year and a half in field training, working up at Cusick. We'd go out every 3 or 4 weeks for 6 days. And then you come back, you regenerate, and you get ready for the next round to take off and start on base, teach, and then head out. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the folks have that opportunity. Once they certify, and they keep going, you have a chance to branch out. And some of those can go into academic training, where they're strictly platform instructors at that point. Some can go into resistance training down in the lab, which...
Hence the psych test you took.
Yes.
Get into that later.
Yeah. We can talk about that for a while. You can also get in, part of the academics training is also parachuting. So then it was an elective to go to jump school. You can also start applying for the different away from Fairchild assignments, such as back then it was Homestead Air Force Base out of Miami. Now, then it went up to Tyndall. Then it came up here to Fairchild. We had the Panama School for jungle training. We also had one in the Philippines. We had and still have one up at Eielson, the Arctic School, the Cool School. I'm trying to think where else we had some. Then in the early 80s, through Operation Deep Look, they found that Strategic Air Command were losing crew members, and there was a training deficiency they were identifying, and it wasn't lack of will, but the experience level in the different environments that these crews were being placed in different exercises. And they said, we need to do something about that. And they said, well, what do we do? I mean, our resources are limited. And they said, well, let's take a look at putting a survival instructor and integrate them with the AIF community and do some of that training at base levels throughout the Strategic Air Command. So in 1984, they started looking at different people to go out and different bases to assign. And at that moment, I took the opportunity to say, yeah, if you send me to Offutt, I'll re-enlist. So it was called the base of preference. I think that's starting to come back. So I re-enlisted, and I went down to Offutt, where I joined the 55th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing, and that's the shop where you and I met. There's 55 AIF guys in that building?
Yeah. Back then they called it life support.
Yeah.
And in 2008 we merged with the survival equipment parachute shop, and then called Aircrew Flight Equipment. That's the AIF acronym.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think I got there January of '86. I think so. I didn't meet you right when I walked in the door. Scared and a brand new. Airman somewhere, chem defense, where they put me first. So I think it's probably 9 months in, then I met you, and then you started learning about your career field.
Yeah, and my assignment there was to, as the first individual or the first SERE presence at Offutt, was to establish a field training environment and couple that with academic training. And it's all designed to be refresher training. So there's nothing new being taught here. It's just getting these guys back in and saying, okay, this is a signal mirror, this is this. These are the environments, these are particulars. We didn't bring the code of conduct in due to classification reasons and training reasons. A lot of the guys that went out may not have been current in resistance training. So what we did is we just took a look at the field aspect. And we set up a training environment down at Camp Ashland, which is halfway between Omaha and Lincoln.
Yeah, remember that.
It was the ROTC facility for the Lincoln Army National Guard. And we worked with the Air Medical Service out of Lincoln, had an Army unit there. So we had helicopter support for some of our air needs. And then we slowly built up the program into about a 3-day program, 2 to 3 day program. And we were rotating, I think we had 12 guys, 12 to 20 going out into the field. And for aggressors, we'd use some of the life support troops. We'd use some of the cops, some of the other people that were intel folks that were coming down, and they'd go look for the evaders as we'd teach them, then release them to evade from point A to point B and see how they'd do. And teach them how to overcome the deficiencies that were spotted, or, we know where they're going. So we'd also pull them aside and say, hey, that was a great move. If I didn't know where you were going, I never would have found you.
Right.
So
and they need to hear that.
Yeah. You got to build up their confidence to let them know that this isn't about me just lowering the hammer on them. That it's about me helping you become better and understanding how good you are. With that, Offutt had, what do we have, 1,500 helmets in that shop?
Yeah. Yeah, between 1,100 and 1,500.
And only half the crews wore helmets.
Yeah, because there was just some quick dons up front for masks and stuff, and
we had
headsets.
E4Bs, which is a 747. We had KC-135, RC-135, EC-135, T-135. We had the T-39, the C-21s, and then we had T-37, T-38s variants throughout. Then we also had the headquarters folks that were coming down on flight status looking for training. Well, what about my aircraft? Well, okay, I guess I'm going to have to learn about B-52s now, or whatever they're flying. Right. So it kept us hopping. And if I didn't have you guys backing me up, teaching me what kits they have, I would have been lost.
There's no way one guy can handle that workload anyway.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult to saturate yourself with all that stuff that you're going to have to bring to them and do a good job. And I feel that after 6 years of running a program there, we had a very solid operation there. I'm trying to think of where. With that helicopter unit down in Lincoln, their life support troops came to us, and we were training them as well. And their goal was to learn how to do this training because their flyers had a 15-year deficiency in survival training. It was a reoccurring write-up for 15 standing years. And they said, we got to get rid of this. We got to do something. And I said, okay, I will put the program together for you. I'll show you how to run it. So I got 3 of their life support troops, and they started coming in and augmenting the instruction so they would get some platform time. They'd get some field time. And then we started taking a look at the equipment they had, and then they put on their annual training event, and they ran the show. They conducted all the training and eradicated that 15-year write-up. So it was a great job on both sides.
Was there a lot of paperwork involved with it back then as far as
Zero.
the certifying? That's what I wonder because right
on the Army
now,
side,
it's just, and on the Air Force side, it can be pretty crazy, all the paperwork certifications. It can get pretty intricate.
It can. And it was at Fairchild, but being the sole survival instructor at Offutt, nobody knew what to do. they could look at the books. And they said, okay, 7-level. There wasn't a 7-level course. So what do you do? And that's where the chiefs all got together and said, okay, this is how we're going to handle that particular issue. And so the growth, by putting a guy out there by himself, he's pretty much isolated. There's, thank God for Audubon, because I was calling a lot of the other bases, talking to the other guys. I made a couple of trips up to North Dakota to see Steve Josephson, who was up at Grand Forks, and went out on one of his exercises just so we could talk about what we're doing and different ways of managing the assets that we do have. If you look at this reg, you'll find out that you can get all these training assets based on the regs, not just living out of a dumpster. Right. So we had the ground survival aspect going. Then they said, let's do wet water survival training and not in a pool. And I'm wondering if you were around for that part, because I know Rudy McAllister was.
Yes. Yeah. I went to Camp Ashland with you.
And ran that out of a swamp.
Yeah, I believe there was a safety inspection after I left. So I think things changed, but I got to be there during that fun part. Because when Rudy and I were working for you, I believe once you got us trained up, and as time went on, we got to train a few more blocks of training. But I believe Monday was all-day academic training for the basic land survival. And then Tuesdays, we would go out and do all that. And I can't remember if we did water in the afternoon or if that was a different day.
I think that was a different day.
That was a different day. And I remember, so that was probably Wednesdays. And then Thursdays, I remember a lot of the E4B, the NECAP, National Emergency Airborne Command Post folks. And that was just an afternoon, and that was all basically an equipment block of training. Right. So Rudy and I got to do a lot of that for you. And then Friday was like clean everything up. And and another one was like post egress as well, the hanging harness area, because you had that in there.
We had to do that for the 3738 community.
Yeah, demo narration on those.
That's right.
How to properly fit that harness, and you'd have us up there, and because when you have a parachute issue, you have to lift yourself up and just drop yourself on the harness. And if you had it fit right, that was fine. But that got a lot of oohs and ahs out of the audience. When you had it fit right, you can just really drop yourself. But that was never fun being in that harness for those guys.
But we also had the aircrew chem defense and ground crew chem defense we had to run.
That's right. That was in there too.
So we were running about 5 days a week.
Yeah.
From 1st of April to the end of November.
That's right. It was seasonal. That's how we were able to use a 5-day work week and get more than 5 types of classes in.
And then we would drop the field aspect and pound up more of the aircrew chem defense because that was an annual training at that time.
Right.
And then, that was, so it was about, I think they figured at one point, because Sergeant Norton put in a request for a second survival body, because his numbers showed 3,200 people coming through a year.
Yeah.
And it was declined. So we went on with the tremendous backing of that shop. So we made it work. That is what you do. Mm-hmm. And then, let's see, what was that, 90? May or June of 90, I think it was. They decided that what we ought to do, or maybe 89, we ought to just drop this survival program because we just aren't using it. It's like a expensive Air Force insurance policy.
Because that was within a year after I left, so I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so they said, we got it, SERE. You can go back to Fairchild or wherever you came from. We'll take it from here. And so they said, okay, you're coming back. And that August, Saddam invaded Kuwait. Mm-hmm. and put a whole new light on what we needed. And Intel walked up to me and said, here's what we need. We need an environmental brief for Iraq. We need the code of conduct for Iraq. And they said, okay.
Which is that's classified briefing, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And we need chem defense briefings.
Yeah. So life support folks can't go in there and do any of that type of training.
That's
for
right.
The code of conduct for you.
So I went to the only source I really had for all this environmental stuff, because internet wasn't there yet. So I went to the library and I started pulling up books and all that stuff, and came up with to fill the outline that they had given me. I didn't know that this was a SAC headquarters mandate, and it listed everything that was supposed to be done. They gave me a handwritten note that said here.
Yeah, and that's the amazing part, because there's so many Air Force regs and follow this and tell you exactly how to do things and get inspected on it. But you had the freedom to be asked or told what's needed, and you build it yourself. I wish some of those days had come back, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and Intel's the folks who told me to do this. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, okay. So I went to the library, came up with all this, and came up and made a lot of photocopies. And I went down to them and I said, well, here's the lesson plans. Here you go. And here's like a 90-page book for the environments. I didn't put any of the code of conduct in there, but I put the chem defense stuff in there.
Yeah.
And they printed some 10,000 of those and took them over to the desert with them. Mm. And then they took all those lesson plans and said, thank you, we got it from here. And all that was done in about 72 hours of Saddam going into Iraq, or into Kuwait.
Wow.
The very first fatality for Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield, was a staff sergeant from Omaha, from Offutt, who was killed on the flight line. He was a maintenance troop, and we had done a lot of training for anybody who wanted training, and I don't know if he got that training or not, but he was one of the first, or he was the first fatality. That always hung with me. I volunteered to deploy over, and this is in August. They said, no, you can't go because we need all these untrained crew members and untrained assets to get the training before they enter theater. That's the requirement.
Yeah, so that pipeline doesn't stop, so it
doesn't.
Keeps you from going other places and doing other things.
And they had taken a big chunk out of the life support shop to go on the Advon team to get over there and get things set up. So there wasn't any more going over to Sergeant Bradshaw or Sergeant Snyder and saying, hey, can you pick up this so I can eat lunch today? They just said, you just keep moving forward. So that's what we did until January of 91, when January 16th, I left Offutt, and about halfway up to Sioux City, Bush got on the television, President Bush got on the television and said, the operation to free Kuwait is underway. And we had gone into Kuwait to eradicate the Iraqi presence and liberate those people, because that's what we do. Mm-hmm. That was an awesome thing to hear the President of the United States say we have entered conflict. Yeah. So by the time I got to Fairchild, 5-6 days later, whatever it was, a whole new world was there.
Right.
And so I got here and I was assigned back into the field flights. And I worked in the field flights for a couple more years. I've picked up a couple of administrative positions while I was in survival. Financial stuff, safety, somebody's got to do it. So that was part of my career path. Came out of that, went back into field flights, did some more training. And I was getting close to the end of my career, and I said, writing, I'm at about 19 years. I'm ready to retire. I had one thing left to do, and I promised myself that I would get my college degree. So I took another administrative position and started working on my college degree. I really wanted to present that to my mom.
Right.
And unfortunately, she passed away before I completed that.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, I was like 3 classes shy. And but you know what? I was on the 25-year program. I got it.
Yep.
So I was getting ready to get out of the Air Force in 90. In 2000. Let's see, 2000, yeah. And the trade towers went down in 2001.
Yep.
And I said, now is not the time. Nobody should be wanting to get out here.
Right.
This is what we trained for. And so I stayed in. I said, I looked at my wife and I said, this will be quick. We'll be in and out of this one too, fairly fast. Look how fast it went in Iraq, you know. So I extended and kept extending. At this time, I became a curriculum developer, and I was taking a look at the different courses because we were short in that career field too, or in that aspect of supporting the career field. It was strictly military. We didn't have the civilian population there to back us up. So we started taking a look at the hot fires within the different curriculums and start putting those out. There's like 4 or 5 of us there. And then that lasted another 2 years. No, it lasted a bit longer than that. In 2003, they were looking for people to go in and be a part of Operation Northern Watch.
Right.
And I said, yeah, that sounds cool. It's, 3 months? Yeah, I can do that. So I volunteer. My superintendent, Sergeant SERE, said, you know what? Yeah, you and I were the SAC guys who went out first and didn't get to deploy because we had to support our air crews at home station. So if you want this, I'll put your name in the hat for it. And I got selected on one of those assignments. We were to report to Doha. What is that? Al Udeid or Al Dhafra?
Al Udeid, that's in Qatar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
I'd been to that one, but not the other.
yeah, I spent 2 months there working at the backdrop to the PR missions. And what we were doing was checking everybody's documents and making sure that they were properly filled out, not just passports. We didn't care about that stuff. It was those documents, the isopreps, that help us identify them and bring them back. Mm-hmm. So we'd go through everybody who come into the country. We'd take a look at them, try and straighten them out if they needed it, or approve them and push them forward. We'd also take a look at people's plans. Keep in mind the true amateur in a PR mission is the pilot. He's not done this before. He may have trained for some of this, but now we got to make him predictable so that the professionals know what's going to happen when they get on the ground and start looking for this cat. So we started doing the isopreps, then other half of us would be overtraining these other individuals who didn't get their pre-deployment training and ended up in theater without it. So they'd show up on the rotator. 6 hours later, they were sitting in our classroom. Our classroom was a canvas tent that may or may not have had air conditioning, and it was July. And it was plenty toasty in there.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And it was like 114 degrees outside.
Great academic training atmosphere,
I'm
I'm sure.
It is. You have their full attention.
Nobody's tired.
No.
Nobody's cranky.
For a 4-hour block of training. And, they're mostly just the air crew members coming in. Occasionally we got other people coming through the area that you didn't know who they were, but yeah, you could pretty much figure out what they needed. So we did that for 2 months. From there, guys were sent out forward operating locations so that they could get into Army locations. We were having problems with, and it's not an Army or Marine or Navy specific problem. It's a problem of how much training can you put into a finite period. And if you're going to drop training time from someplace, it's not going to be in how to shoot a weapon. It's going to be in your insurance policy. And that's what the SERE community was there to fill and to backfill. And so a lot of these guys were going out into dirt holes and conducting training. And that was really our bread and butter, where people got to see what the SERE community was bringing to the fight. They were bringing insight to the theater. They were bringing insight to predictability, the PR capability. So
Updated equipment, because that really started rolling.
you bet. We went from the PRC 90 radio with 2 frequencies and a little Morse code button on the top to the hook radio, which led way to the C-cell radio. And the hook radio is a dynamic radio, and it is notoriously known for saving several aircrew and ground crew guys because of their ability to connect over the horizon to rescue.
Yeah, the Guard really hung on to the hook system for a long time. And there was some headbutting between active duty and them trying to get this, to go with C-cell to one system. But I learned the hook really well on our side.
Right.
I really, really liked it. It's understandable. C-cell is a little harder for me to understand, but then I ended up not being the one programming them and stuff anyway. So the younger, smarter gamer guys took that over.
That's right. So, yeah, and they're 2 different systems completely. And anybody who knows me knows my preference towards the C-cell for a lot of different reasons. But it is one complete system, and C-cell the hook relies on some outside assets. But C-cell already has those assets part of their system.
Yeah, and why not have more of the services using the same thing? It all makes sense.
Yeah, if we can put the same thing into everybody's hand, we only have one thing to teach. And under the threat of being shot, and you're looking at a block of metal, you want to make sure that whatever they're looking at, they remember. And they had 2 operating systems. One was hook, one was C-cell. You couldn't bring them together. So what your muscle memory was telling you about hook wouldn't work on the C-cell. So, yeah.
And you're doing that all under duress. So
Yes.
might be hard for you to remember in the first place. That's why the training that you have been talking about this whole time, it all has to be instinctual.
It does. Muscle memory, and that's really what we develop, whether it's in a POW environment or a non-tactical environment. As long as you have that muscle memory, it's going to work. And back in the 80s when we got here, our big deal was the POW environment. That was it. And the non-tactical. Today, we have 3 different environments to worry about. You got political, you got social, and you got tactical. And any one of our aviators or any of our personnel can end up in any one of those environments, and then you got to respond differently. That's what we're doing different now than we were doing in 82.
And you can throw any of those 3 into an urban environment now.
Yes, you can.
It's another facet of that deal.
Yes. So it's just like, oh my God, how much more do you have to give? And so we keep trying to find the next nugget before it starts to get exploited. And then once you find that next nugget that you have to start training, you have to take that back to the troops, the SERE community, the rescue community, the AIF community, and say, this is our obstacle. and the intel community. How are we going to overcome this obstacle? What do we have in our bag now? And what do we need to put in the bag that we don't have? Where can we get it? How do we develop that?
Mm-hmm.
We had the mother of all blood chits for a while, which is an American flag with a bunch of different writings on it, different language and dialects, saying, please help me,
Right.
So then all of a sudden you go from one language to 15 different languages. You go from a radio that works 60 nautical miles if the aircraft's at X feet to a radio that works around the world. Mm-hmm. I took the C-cell up to the Arctic Circle and talked to Anaheim, California, flawlessly. Yeah, it was, that's the technology we have today. And how can we exploit that? So,
when you were going through your training, the initial SERE training, what did you learn the easiest or take to the most, and what was the most difficult to get through with the training itself? You being trained.
Let's just put instruction aside, because that's taking this mass of knowledge and being able to present it is its own challenge.
Right.
Because there you're starting to read people. You're starting to get into a lot of psychological development of your crews in front of you. But the actual acts out there, navigation is probably one of the things that I enjoy the most doing and teaching, all the different aspects. The environment that is probably one of the most difficult is that transition between winter and spring, or fall and winter, where you don't know if it's going to rain, you don't know if it's going to snow, you don't know if it's going to be a mix.
Right.
And inside those, it develops the problems of how to do your firecraft, how to maintain 98.6, whether it's your clothing or external heat source or shelter. So
I know some students that went through, they were talking about, especially the late fall into winter, that transition. There's I would rather had it been 0 degrees than, rainy and 40.
And that's what General LeMay was talking about back in Germany. Guys don't know how to do that. And they figure it's easier to not have to worry about that. We need to instill that knowledge in our crew members so that they come back intact and alive and whole.
And the tactical side of that is even worse when you talk about keeping the 98.6, because you can talk about the fires, and you mentioned it takes a little bit more to make fires with wet wood, shaving down into it and stuff. But now when you're in tactical environment, are you building a fire even? That really changes things, because you're the deer being hunted at that point.
The threat assessment.
Yeah.
Do I do the little hole in the ground and have a tiny little fire and put the map over me to contain the heat inside me? How do I do it?
And never burn anything man-made, because it'll burn black or dark.
Yeah. Being prepared is vital. Being prepared is essential. There was a fella, and I'm going to get his name wrong, but I read his book. It's called Tap Code. And this is back in the 60s. He's going through survival training. And on break, he walks up to an instructor and says, you mentioned something about the tap code. Can you explain that a little bit more? And so in a 5-minute presentation, this guy wrote out the tap code, explained how to use the tap code to communicate. And he goes, oh, okay, I got it. He goes over and is the number 3 American aviator put into the Hanoi Hilton. Because of this 5-minute conversation with an instructor in a break room. He teaches the other Americans the tap code that became infamous in their methods of communicating, not just in the Hanoi Hilton, but all the others, because they'd take these guys from the Hilton and move them to different places because they couldn't figure out what was going on. Let's break them up, put the hardliners over here because they've tried to escape. Now they're teaching all these guys the tap code, and nobody could break it.
I never knew the origin of that.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It's an amazing book. The guy is from Tupelo, Mississippi. That's just what 5 minutes out of 2 people's lives can change. And that's what we're here to do.
And that created a network of communication for POWs.
Yes.
Long, slow, and arduous,
Long, slow, and arduous.
but communication nonetheless.
Yeah. And what that also did was get names and serial numbers spun throughout the class. So I'm trying to remember the name of the Navy dude who took over 100 people's names and serial numbers and returned to the U.S. during a prisoner exchange and reported all these people. And some of them, they hadn't known their condition or their status. So that's what we do.
And for the individuals to have that kind of will and brain power to do all that while getting beat, starved, under duress, like none of us have ever.
Or watching their buddies get
Exactly,
beat.
right.
You know, that in itself is awesome. To have to think about watching your best friend, your survivor mate, get tortured because you won't release the information. Doug Hegdahl is the POW who took all those names back. He memorized them to the tune of "Oh McDonald."
Really?
And he was released ahead of time, but the chain of command within the Hilton said, "No, you got intel. You need to get back. So we're going to release you, approve you for release ahead of time." Another South Dakota boy. So,
Man. And using tricks or a style in order to remember, to make your brain work in a certain way that you can hold that kind of information is absolutely
I can't remember
amazing.
what I had for breakfast.
Yeah.
And this guy's doing it with names and serial numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now, we'll step back a little bit as to when you're an instructor at Fairchild and Offutt. Do you have any stories you want to, anything that you found comical, or what's sticking out in your head with the training? We won't get personal or anything, but just
No, it's, there is so much out there. There really is. Most of them are kind of personal ones,
Sure.
not necessarily to me, but they'll expose other individuals.
Yeah. One thing I remember that just sitting back, Rudy McAllister and I would sit back and we'd watch you instruct, then you would watch us instruct, and we got to where we could do the equipment class together, and we would try to put a little clown act down there a little bit where I'm over here on the far side of the room and, what's this? And I'd just throw it over my head and it would go 20 feet over to Rudy and he'd catch it and do that. But I remember you talking about, I don't know, it's post-egress or if it was one of the academic survival trainings, but you said something about landing in an extreme austere environment, like East St. Louis. I remember you saying that. Was that one of
Shock.
your common lines?
It was shock.
Was it shock?
Psychogenic shock.
I've never been to East St. Louis, but I don't think I'm going to go. Those are the things that I'm looking for.
And you watch a fantastic academic instructor, and they will do that. You watch guys, I had one of my students. Well, he wasn't one of mine. I was watching another instructor work with one of his initial classes. And I said, what you need to do is go over and talk to that girl over there, the sergeant or whatever it was, airman. And I said, you need to find out what's going on. because right now she's not hearing you. And it's not that she's daydreaming. She's projecting forward another week being out in the field. And he goes, no, she's fine. I said, no, you need to go have that conversation. And he walked over and he had the conversation with her, and it went on for about a half hour, and he came back and he goes, holy cow. She was absolutely petrified and has no idea what she needs to be doing now. So it's about taking a look at who's around you and how you can read them and open them up to be where their hands are. We need the students to be where their hands are, not where their body's going to be in a week.
Right. A lot of stresses.
It is. And
Fear of the unknown, that's a big thing.
and there's a camp about a mile away from that academic building they're thinking about as well.
Right.
And we try and keep them away from that environment as well. Just don't worry about it. That hasn't come yet. The one thing that all that survival training did for me was teach me there are only 24 hours in a day. I do know that. I was out with I think it was Staff Sergeant Luke Bourne. He and I were out walking the trail one day, and it was absolutely miserable. It was raining up. We looked like something out of Gump, because we were going through a swamp, and we had a film crew with us because Captain O'Grady had just been returned, and they wanted to know all of the training he went through. So we had a crew with us, and we're going through a swamp, and people are losing their shoes in the muck, and you know what? All I could think of is, yeah, okay. There's only 24 hours in this day. Somewhere along the line, we're going to be with the students at a safe location, and we'll start drying this stuff out. I was out in Dugway, Utah, which is 110 miles south of the tip of the Salt Lake, Great Salt Lake, and we were doing an evasion exercise. And we had a Navy SEAL team coming in to pick up the downed air crew, and they could not find us. They absolutely had no idea. They misread the map, they misread the land features, and they were off by about 2 miles. Eventually, we get them into our location, and they grab the survivors. They're walking down, and the leader, I think he was a lieutenant of that SEAL team, looked at me and goes, I don't know how we did it, but we'll unscrew this tomorrow. You tell me where we are and where we need to go. And that told me a lot. That the leader of this SEAL team is looking for outside input.
Right.
And if he can ask for that, given what they are, we can certainly do that, trying to figure out what's going on at home, let alone out on a battlefield. So that was a huge deal. And once he figured out where he was, he took charge again.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, we're coming across the desert, and
But at least he put his ego at the left
Hung
it
it.
at the door and talked to you and
he hung it. And
figured out what we call the way ahead. Don't
That's
worry
right.
about the past. What's the way ahead?
yeah, as we're coming out at the foot of the Skull Mountains, he says, what do you think? I said, well, if they come out of the hills, we can run down to the plains. And if they come off the plains, we can run up into the hills. So I'd stay up here on this midline and get down into that brush. And he goes, yeah, I'm thinking. So I got it from here.
I got it from here. Excellent.
Yeah, he had it from there. But the next day, after being home, he sat down with the map and he goes, now explain to me what this is about.
Right.
How do we miss this? And as I went through it, he went, got it. And they were fundamental errors.
Right.
That when you overthink issues, that's what happens.
So you had mentioned you had retired from the Air Force, and then you were asked to come back as a federal employee, civilian,
Yes.
and you had a certain number of years with that. Before I retired 2.5 years ago, I think, we'll say maybe 6 years ago, they finally started bringing some SERE into the Guard. Did you have a hand in that, or any kind of advising, or did you know about it? Or
I knew about it. We had Eisenhower was his name. Good, smart guy. Worked in our shop to develop a curriculum for the Guard-based SERE Bubba. Okay, so they're going to come in and they're going to gain the first, 10 months active duty or on active duty orders, I think is how you term it.
Sure.
And then go back to their units and do upgrade training through the Guard. But this is what the upgrade training is going to look like. So did I advise, recommend, suggest anything? No. Eisenhower had it all. Smart guy. So.
Yeah, because it was kind of like the beginning of your training where, a guy's like an island. Now he's onto the SCAR base instead of active duty base, and he's an island trying to figure things out with his other bubbas. I think there's only 12 or 13 at first.
Yeah.
And there were some difficulties here and there with that.
Now, do you guys come in through recruiting, basic training, right into tech school, or do you report to your Guard base first?
We try to have it be pipelined straight through, but especially after 911, there's a lot of difficulties there with school slots and things.
Sure.
That I had one young airman. I think he didn't go to tech school, I think, for like maybe 9 or 10 months after basic. So he came back and was in our shop and, couldn't touch equipment and stuff. But there were some difficulties there. Some of that got better through the years. So, but if you can pipeline somebody,
pipeline's preferred.
Do it.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
What they're trying to do is figure out the best pipeline. Because right now, well, when I left, you had a start window and you had a finish window, but you couldn't join anywhere in between. And if you can find some way to lope people in, especially on a 6-month, let alone like a PJ career field or a TAC P career field, how to get them in more than just a single entry point. Your production's going to be greater, I would think.
Right.
So,
well, they were in my shop, and I was the ops chief the last 3 years, but federal employee-wise, I was their supervisor during the week. So I didn't get to know the younger guys quite as well as when my office was in there, but there's a couple of them that were really intrigued with the SERE, and I was many years ago. But that was good to see, that they've just got that interest, and working on our equipment and stuff is good. But I really liked the melding of that with the usage of that equipment.
Yeah, I tell you what, it'd really be difficult for survival to do their job if the AIF community wasn't there. What are we going to teach? What are we going to train with? What are we going to train to?
What are the changes in the survival kit?
Yeah.
New equipment. Got to know that.
Yeah. When I was still stationed up here back in the early 80s, I would go home to Omaha, and then I'd go down to Offutt, and I'd go into the life support shop, introduce myself, and take a look, and I'd get the inspection cards, and I'd say, what is in your kits? And they'd write all the different aircraft, and then they'd check off what was in each individual kit. And I started looking at that going, how do they keep this stuff straight? Yeah.
And how do they get it all in there? Because there's limited. That was our big challenge is, you want to get the air crew as much as you can, but there's a finite space, and then you have to prioritize.
And weight
as well.
On your ejection crews. Now you got to worry about how that's going to impact the ejection.
Right.
So it isn't as simple as saying, let's put a bonfire pill in there to keep these guys warm, or a ghillie suit to keep them concealed.
Yeah. And that's what you were talking about earlier, all the different entities working together, because they had to.
We did. And, everybody's overstepped their bounds and stepped out of their lanes. Mm-hmm. We learn from it. We say, well, maybe I shouldn't do that next time. Mm-hmm. Because it isn't about me getting that accomplished. It's about getting that guy home.
Right.
And when you got people like Captain O'Grady coming back after 6 days in Bosnia, that's a pretty sweet deal. Mm-hmm. Or Roger Locker coming home from Vietnam after 45 days. That's a lot of evading and eating bugs.
It is.
There was no McDonald's he could sneak up and eat out of the dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things had to come together
Right.
correctly for those people to survive, despite what happened between point A and point B.
Now, with being involved with a lot of that active duty and then as a federal employee and stuff, were you finding it difficult to walk away and leave that behind? I mean, we've all got it instilled in us to a certain point, but then we all have our different points where it's like, okay, I'm good. It's time for the young guys to take over. Did you battle with any of that?
I really didn't. It was
Good to hear.
It was time to come home. There was a time where I spent a year doing a lot of traveling. I'd picked up the C-Cell program for our unit, for our group, and we took that from 6 radios to 250 radios in a matter of 18 months. And then we had to do the training. And then our training became known by the CISO community, where they asked myself and Staff Sergeant, Tech Sergeant Elliott, for us to go out and train other teams how to do this. And we also set up our own little ground station. So we'd have teams out on the East Coast calling us, or we'd have the 7-level team down in Honduras radioing us. And we'd pretend like they were survivors and work the C-Cell system with them.
And you have the training of the user like that, but then with the C-Cell, for at least for my brain, was more difficult, and the training of the programming of the radio. And so we worked a lot. The SERE community helped us a lot to understand the radio better, and then to be making sure that we're giving you guys and the user exactly what you need in that, not messing it up. That's where a lot of our stress comes in.
The problem with it is you can't see if you load what frequency you're loading
Right.
on the radio.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, and one guy said, well, let's just fire it off and see. And I said, well, if you do that, and he was in theater, and this was when I was at
In
Doha.
theater?
Yeah, he was an
my word.
A-10 driver named Snow. And he said, well, I'm just going to fire one of these off and see if I can maintain contact. And I said, you do that, we scrap that entire frequency.
Yeah.
And I will let everybody know it was you. So don't do that.
And that goes service-wide.
Yeah, it goes military-wide.
And military-wide,
Yeah.
everybody that's using those radios.
Yeah. So with that particular radio, and it kind of exemplifies everything else, you have the SERE community teaching you how to use it. You have the AIF community loading it. You've got civilians or PR personnel, which is a maturation of rescue personnel, SERE personnel, and AIF personnel sitting at Doha looking at all this imagery coming in or all this information coming in. If any of those fail, the system fails.
Right.
And so what we have to do is overlap our training and our communication that says, this is what we need to be able to do. Where are the gaps? And that's why training is so important and exercises are so important. They spend a lot of money, but oh my God, they show weaknesses. And we got to embrace that weakness so that we can find the solution to it. We can't deny the weaknesses there.
Yep. And having shortages of instructors, but then not having too large of classes. You know, if you're trying to instruct 15 people versus 8 versus 6, that's the number you want to be at. But it's that with everybody so busy and the commanders and getting the authorizations to do the training and when, and a lot of that in the guard unit in particular, because a lot of the pilots are traditional, meaning part-time, and time is of the essence. But
A week in a month, 2 weeks a year.
yeah, yep.
And tell me again, why do I need this insurance policy?
Yep.
And you need these guys to stand up and say, this is how I used the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, okay.
Right. And on the second podcast that I did, a buddy of mine, Pup, Chris Dirkles in Terre Haute, Indiana, we talked about how when we did get overseas, and then there was so much preparation, and the pilots had a ton of preparation, that once we got there and sat, then they would come around the corner and elbow you and say, and they'd want to grab one or two things off the table and they say, can we go through this again now? And the one-on-one was amazing with that. And that's where they learned the most and retained it.
They're a sponge. They're in that 5 minutes I talked about in a break room between the crew member and the instructor.
Yeah.
And when you see the light come on in a person's eyes and they get the concept and they get the idea, you go, that's why I'm here. I want to watch that light come on, and they make the connection that I need to do this because it impacts this far down the road.
Right. And even amongst the pilots, they will have a different level of questioning. Some are going to be like, all right, bullet statement. What are the things I need to know? Might be like 5 steps. And then you have the other guys that are like, I want to get the 12-step class, but
right.
I'll remember that these 4 are the absolute go-tos.
Yeah.
And then you just adjust to what they want to learn and retain.
Yeah, it's variable. And then what you try and do is take these bullet paper people, and some of them are just so smart that all they need is a bullet paper.
Sure.
But there's some people that hide behind a 5-point bullet paper. And you try and get them over here to the 12-point bullet paper. And not by dragging, but by encouraging them to walk across the room.
Right.
And that's also the art. And it's not limited to a SERE-Bob. We had one guy, he was an Australian in All-You-Need. And one day I walked out as he's getting ready to help the crews load out, and he's taking his helmet and he's throwing them down the hallway because they'll skid on the linoleum.
Oh, jeez.
And I looked at the life support guys, and they said, we tell them every time. And I said, well, we can solve this problem. And we went and got his commander while he was throwing the helmets down the aisle, and it never happened again. Mm-hmm. So it's just how you bring them to this awareness of what's the right thing to do there.
Yeah, not only not breaking things, but we were, and our air crew were pretty good, but in the South Dakota Guard, we were talking to them and explaining to them that at least one AFE person in each unit needs to go to the accident investigation school. So we explained to them that they use any marks, any MARs, any information on that helmet after a mishap to try to figure out what happened. And some of them they're just like, they never thought about, well, on impact, maybe, the pilot was looking this way and down because the HUD was here. And when there's an impact, that it put a gouge right here in the helmet. So then they're putting all this information together to try to figure out what happened. And it was pretty amazing when I went through that school, but we used it to try to have a justification of treat that equipment just a little bit better. Sounds like kind of a morbid subject, but hey, it's all life. It's all military.
It has to be there because those are the facts.
Yep. So having a nice, clean, unmarred helmet, everything's working, then you get that equipment back, hopefully, because some of them are overseas. I was one on one overseas where I had to stay back and help finish an investigation. And it brought all that school training back to me. But like I said, we had a great group of pilots, and they understood just one more step of taking care of that equipment.
It's taking a guy from the 1A level being able to duplicate what you do to a 4D level to predict.
Yep.
And it's huge. It really is. And that's the mentorship in the military forces that has to be harbored and nurtured. Because if we don't do that, we're going to lose that gap.
Right.
Yeah.
So have anything else coming to mind? We went through your beginnings in Omaha, getting into the military unit, choosing your career field, the training. We went quite a while on that, which was this is really what I wanted to pull out of you, and I didn't figure I'd have to pull. I knew you
tug all that hard.
You did a great job explaining all that stuff. Is there anything that you haven't touched on yet that's coming to mind now?
Personally, one of my greatest moments was my last trip to the field as an active duty SERE specialist. And it was a winter trip. I went up to There was a crew in one of my old camps. Another instructor was teaching them, and I asked if I could join on their navigation day. They said, yeah, come on up. We'd love to have you. So I met him up there at 6 o'clock, and a member of that crew he was training was my stepson.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
So he and I got to walk the trail together, and that's huge. That's one of those things that no matter how old I get, I will always remember that winter day when he and I got to walk the trail.
That is special.
It is.
That is special. So going on that theme, thinking of your grandkids, great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids, any of them, what would you like to say to them? Because we're preserving this. That's the great thing. Because when we were younger, there was none of this preserving story, and somebody hopefully will get to see this in your family.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. The one thing my grandkids know absolutely right now, if you ask them how much Papa loves them, they will say, the boys will say from Mars and back, and the girls will say from Venus and back.
Nice.
Because that's just what we have.
Mm-hmm.
What do I want to tell them? If you got a question, ask. And that kind of brings me to another topic. 6 years ago, a lady left Colorado Springs, and nobody really knows where she was going, whether it was Flathead or Spokane. We don't know. But a call came in on a Friday night on a cell phone saying, I'm on a road. I don't know what road, but I'm stuck. And then the call canceled. They don't know if it was a dead battery, bad signal, or what happened. 3 days later, let's just move on. 4 days later, they found her 600 feet from her car.
Oh, no.
She had tried putting clothes underneath the tires to get traction. She tried everything she could, and finally she hiked up the hill to get line of sight with one of the repeaters and self-towers. And she was able to get a partial signal in. So she froze to death 600 feet from her car. That lady was my ex-wife.
Oh, no.
If I had the knowledge, and I reflect on this almost daily, what did I teach her about being outdoors?
Right.
And why wasn't it enough? Apparently it was enough that she knew to go to a higher ground to get a better cell coverage.
Right.
But what was she doing on that road? What was she, why didn't she find her way back? All those things come back to haunt. So if there's an opportunity to share knowledge, share the knowledge. You don't know when it could be of use. And if somebody's sharing knowledge, absorb it, because you don't know when you may be called on to use it.
And that's a great point with survival is not a military thing only.
No, it isn't. No.
A lot of
56
people,
years old.
oh, man.
Yeah.
And you hear on the news casually when this time of year is coming up to put a survival kit in your car, this and that. And it mostly just blows past people.
It does.
But here's a real world situation where that really could have helped.
Yep. And there's so many different things with that. The bottom line is somebody's offering knowledge, take it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the opportunity, share it. So my goal now is to get my grandson out to one of our local training areas and teach him how to use a map and compass.
Right?
Yeah, I just walk through the woods with him. We don't do that enough today.
Do you hunt?
I do. I used to a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe bring some of that back and meld that and
Yeah,
see how it all works together.
we'll see. We'll see. I'd love it if he'd pick it up. I don't think his parents would be objective of it.
Sure.
So we'll see how that goes down the road.
Perfect.
If nothing else, I can also show him how to use a camera.
Yep, absolutely. But the survival stuff for sure.
Yeah.
That is your forte, Bob.
Yep. And it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. Well, I really thank you for agreeing to do this. It was through texting through Messenger, but the feel that I got on that was like no hesitation. Absolutely love to do it. And I was so glad that you accepted.
Never say no to a request for service.
Yep.
So thank you for being here.
You bet. That's the theme of this closing. That's what I'm getting out of this too. So
Good.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You bet.
Good to see you again.
You too. Take care.
God bless.